Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to Turning the Tide, a series from the Tobago Civil Net aimed at combating crime and violence. Now, we are looking at crime and violence from a public health approach. And during this series, we have been chatting with a number of persons. In our first edition, we would have had that interesting conversation with Mr. Quincy Joseph, who is, a person who had a former life of crime and went to prison and has used his life as an example. And in our second edition, I had the privilege, okay, and that one, sorry, was hosted by some of my colleagues, my capable colleagues. We had Xavier Edwards hosting that one, and we want to send out all the best of luck to Xavier. We saw his video being played in the beginning, although we may have had a bit of a technical issues with the audio there. I hope we do get to play it again so you really get to hear the talent that has come from Xavier. This evening, he had the privilege of having an interview on BBC Radio. So although he was originally scheduled to have this conversation this evening, he has to do that. So this evening, I'm sitting in for my colleague Xavier Edwards. And we had Cassel Campbell also hosting that session, doing the interview part of that segment. And you guys did an excellent job. And me, myself, I was able to host the last session, which was last Tuesday with Dr. David Mohammed. And let me tell you, that was a really insightful conversation. A number of topics came to the forefront. We spoke about from school to prison and how some of the areas of the education system has fostered an environment that has caused young Black men to trickle into that prison system. And even as we hinge upon that entire education discussion, and he discussed some of the environmental impacts of crime and violence. We spoke about juvenile delinquency. We spoke about the impact of the home parent system and some of the racial disparities that exist, particularly in Trinidad and throughout the region, that has contributed to crime and violence, and young persons seeing gangs as being a lucrative way of life and connecting and just feeling at home. And this evening, I have the privilege of chatting with the lady herself, Miss Camile Swapp. And this evening, the conversation is going to be really interesting because this is a woman who is extremely passionate about child development and all of the environmental factors that feed into what creates this whole life of crime and violence. But she looks at it from the developmental perspective and how the home and education plays a key role in not just developing the character, but also playing a role in the outcome of a lot of young persons. She, tends to use a lot of statistics and research findings throughout the region. And let me tell you, this is a yard girl, right? A full Jamaican. And I like the fact that even in her discourse, she always draws a reference to some of the similarities that we can see between what's happening in the Jamaican context compared to the Trinidad and specifically the Tobago context. And now this conversation this evening is important not just for persons within the education sector, but for parents, for teachers, and for persons within the community, so that when you receive this type of information, you're not just taking it for yourself, but you can use some of the tips, tricks, and strategies to interact with youths in your community, make recommendations within your organization, or just utilize it in your day-to-day conversations with other parents, especially, we're often having those conversations with parents who are expressing difficulties that they may be having with their children. And you can always reference back to this conversation and some of the expertise put forward by Camile. And this evening, we would allow her to join in the discourse. But before we do, we want to say a special thank you to Eastern Credit Union, who is one of our key sponsors for this discussion this evening. Eastern Credit Union has come on board and played a pivotal role in helping the Tobago Civil Net to continue its work as it has tried to play a key role in Tobago in forwarding the development agenda by allowing Tobagonians to come together by means of a civil society to have a true impact and voice their concerns and issues related to Tobago's development. Now, it's one thing to stand up and say, this is what Tobagonians need and this is what Tobagonians want. But the Tobago Civil Net has taken key actions to truly understand what the people of Tobago want by means of holding a number of public consultations, surveys, and a number of other activities that bring Tobagonians together to have a say. And I want you to know that this session is not our last session. All right, we have one more session after this one, and this is going to take place next week, Tuesday at the same time. Now, this session is being held with Dr. Ulrich Johnson, and he has formally done a number of transformative programs in the United States that help to combat crime and gang violence, which has shown to be extremely effective. And so he and myself, we will be having that discussion next Tuesday, and we will just be drawing the parallels to the United States context and Tobago context, and how some of his particular recommendations can be implemented here in Tobago. Now, that was a lot. And so without further ado this evening, we're going to have a very hearty conversation. But before we get into our conversation, I'm just going to chit-chat a bit with our guest speaker this evening, Miss Camile Swapp. We want to say good evening to you, Camile, and how are you doing?
Good evening. Oh, Chanel, it's so nice seeing you. And thanks to all the people who are attending today. We're gathered to talk about our safety and the best approaches that our youth can do very well in Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago is hosting, so yeah, Tobago. And
Yes.
of course, my homeland, Jamaica, because of the similarities, because we share one major system, our think tank system. So thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you, but some persons might be hearing of you for the first time this evening, right?
Yeah,
so I'm to tell the people, firstly, what drew you to the area that you are in now? What piqued your interest in that child developmental psychology and its the environmental impacts on child development?
Years ago, I changed my profession. I always said to my kids, travel is the best university. We went away to live in Sweden. And my first child, when we were leaving Sweden, challenged me on the flight back. She was happy to go back to Jamaica because she had missed her country. And she was 9 years old. And she said, Ma, I'll never like learning the way I liked it in Sweden. And that did it for me. And I turned to her and I said, well, mommy's changing. I've learned a lot. And if I have anything to do with it, we're going to go back with some news and I'm going to do some research. And I changed my career. I was actually in sales, doing very well for Xerox, selling computer systems and all of that. And I went to study and I wanted to know about children's development. I wanted to know about brain development. And it was almost like I was an investigative reporter just asking questions. And of course, people, teachers, college, principals of teachers college would talk to me, teachers would talk to me, parents would talk to me, children would talk to me. And I would read and I would read and I would see how many times Sweden would come up under the discussion of human development. But certainly, my first child was, more sickly, ear, nose, and throat. She can't go to work. She's not feeling well. She can't go to school today. And then we went there for 2 years and she wants to walk through snow because we didn't have a car. And she just blossomed. And of course, as a parent, I had so much gratitude. I met another Jamaican woman there who had 2 boys. We had 2 girls, same ages apart, 6 years apart. It was amazing. And so we were in a public school that created an international stream because they realized people were just coming through Sweden, Malmö, Sweden, only for 2 years, right? And I learned so much about the joy of learning and children learning through play. And, oh, mom, you're a little pushy. She will enjoy it, and I was worried about her going back into my system to do, let's say, end of common entrance, which you say SEA. I was so worried, but she had so much fun with learning. And I said, you know what? We can do this and it's time. And I was talking to educators and talking to parents. Then I started to connect. I started to connect dots, and it's just been an amazing journey. It's 20 odd years and living between Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. I stayed there for 10 years. I went back home. So the second child could have a little of the Jamaican culture. And then I came back to Trinidad. But as I walked that walk, I was talking to parents. I went up into St. Barb's Laventille years ago. And Reverend Manswell and another gentleman was doing a lot of good work up there. And they asked me to just speak on the streets about boys. And so we had a microphone and we were saying, mothers come out, take a moment, fathers come out, boys come out. And we started to talk about brain development. And I never forget a mother, she said when she listened to all the discussion about maturation and boys, and there are girls who are having a difficulty too, but I'm just focusing boys now. She said, I thought it was only our boys who were suffering. I thought we were the only bad people. And I said, no. It's an international discussion about boys, but some countries have made adjustments and we have not really made the kind of adjustment. And it would be like months later, and your then Patrick Manning, who spoke about, and I hope St. Barb's is peaceful. He said he noticed a change, and not just because of me. There was a lot going on. They had a homework center. They invited me back to speak to them. The teenagers asked questions on the street, and it was very dynamic. So I have this dream about a rolling bus going through communities in your country and mine, where we're just having chats in communities and in schools about development and brain development and the joy of learning, which is a way of life.
Right.
I am thankful to Tobago CivilNet. Thank you so much for wanting to hear from me. And I am all for the public health approach because it will bring in all, just like COVID. We did pretty well for small island territories on COVID. Why? We did not just blame China, like how we blame families sometimes. We said, okay, it came from China. Okay, some of the violence comes from how families are operating. But they looked at every area to around the meter. We don't want to get COVID. Well, we don't want to have violence. So we need to look in every area. This evening, I'll be focusing more in the learning area for home and school, but predominantly for school because school is more structured.
Right. And so with all of this, understanding your background and where your passion came from, this evening we're talking about joyful learning and a little bit about brain development, between the 2 genders. And so we look forward to that. So without further ado, I'm going to give you the floor and allow you to give
my own learning.
give us a brief presentation and a brief understanding of where exactly you're coming from, because it may seem so theoretical, it may seem so data driven, but when
I
you
get it.
persons are able to understand it on such a personal level. And so this evening, I look forward to you bringing it home and, allowing persons who previously may not have even seen this as an area to pay attention to factor it into when they assess children, when they judge children, and when we judge youth and the decisions that they make. So you have the floor now. Go ahead.
Sure. I need to share my presentations. I need to see that I am open to do that. I'm not seeing yeah. We have to close out on your side so I can share. Share. Okay, good. All right. There. Are we in?
Excellent.
You seeing it? Seeing the slide?
Yes, we can.
I was trained by the best. So you see how the brain works? Now, nobody don't give me any SEA test on this thing, because I really try hard. Okay. So joyful learning, an antidote to ailing, failing, and misbehaving. What is this joyful learning? Tobago CivilNet, thank you. Eastern Credit Union, thank you. Attendees, thank you. But together we're going to do this. I'm going to ask you to have a little patience with me. I don't believe in giving information overload, but then we're trying to pack a lot in. The human spirit, the core of the human spirit is to say I can, and I can do well, and I'm bright, and I have something to offer. And we have to guard that properly. And especially for children who can't articulate until much older, I never did so well in school, this happened and that happened. But for now, they learn through their feelings. Their esteem is very important when they're learning. And we protect them because they are vulnerable, because they have to follow all our rules at home and school. But we need to know that we are focused on the human. So Adams, I'm going to ask you to look back. I'm going to ask you to, are you hearing me properly? Are you hearing me? Hello?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
You can? Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, so we need to do some reflective thinking. What was it like for us, probably primary, if we can remember, and high, if we can remember. And when we talk about children's development, we know women in a certain age group, 40-something to 50-something or 60, we know men in a certain age group can gather, huddle, and talk about some things that affect them, although we're individuals. It's like that for children. So we have to check on our information. Okay, I'm going to ask you, how are you feeling now? So look on this slide, type in menti.com, forget the meter, www.menti.com. The code is 25612899. So type in www.menti, forget the meter, MENTI.com, and your code is 25612899. Tell me how you're feeling now. Just type in how you're feeling now. Little tired. Anybody else? I see 2 responses. Tired, little tired. Hopefully I can wake it up. Okay. So I'll take those 2 responses. And anxious. Okay.
Can you say the code again?
The code is, let me give you back the code. Hold on a little. Let's give you back this code. Anxious, tired. Okay, 25612899. All right. They're doing it? Okay. All right. Okay. Are we there? We seeing the responses?
I think you need to click back the link so we can get the responses.
Okay. Let's see what we have here. Yes, grateful, hopeful, excited, tired, eager, relieved, optimistic. Hey, that's all good. All good, right? Yes, contented, relieved. Okay, great, great. Okay, so, no, sorry, clicking the wrong thing. Let's go to the keynote. Right, so we moved on for that. Yes, people, what is the excitement for learning? What is this joyful learning? Is it airy-fairy? How can we even use it on this system right now? Basically, it's going to be how much patience we'll have for the learner. It's also going to be more information through joyful learning, joyful learner, and so we can be raising joyful learners about child development, brain development, teen development, and young adult development. So there, I'll show you some of the bullet points on joyful learning, but most of the literature, you're going to see quotations. I'll speak through the quotations, but it's to show you what science is saying about why children, we have to be careful when we're teaching, when we're using our curriculum, the school environment, the home environment. Why are these things important to a developing brain? Because they look big sometimes, but they're not thinking like how we're thinking, all right? So we are born excited to learn, and there is a role of happiness that's needed. And I think you remember when a child was in the early childhood, I can count. Very excited. And at a teacher's college in Trinidad, it was a professor who said to me years ago, Camille, yes, where did the joy go? They were so happy in early childhood. So a former principal, Miss Jennifer Gittens from St. Francois Girls, she has something to say about her experience with this information, brain development, and joyful learning. I'm hearing that you are not hearing the information. Hold on, let me do this. One second.
Good day. I am Ms. Jennifer Gittins, a former principal of St. Francis College in Belmont, Port Spain. In 2018, our staff, parents, and students were recipients of information on brain child development and joyful learning through our professional development program presented by Mrs. Camile Swapp. The information gained allow us to do the following. 1. Formulate school policy on streaming students of Form 1 by age in order to facilitate curriculum delivery. 2. Design lesson plans to suit the appropriate age groups in order to facilitate learning. 3. Work closely with Class Y, which was very unsettled. When information was shared with them on brain development, they became relieved to know that they were not stupid or lazy, but that their challenges were real and not of their making. Students of Class Y became more settled in the classroom, and at the end of the term, there was improvement in academic performance. When class-wide parents were exposed to the information on brain, child development, and joyful learning, some became aware that their expectations of their children were unrealistic. Some parents also developed a better rapport with their children. In conclusion, if educators are interested in the well-being of the learners, we need to pay closer attention to the research literature on this topic. Thank you for listening. Do have a successful program.
Okay, here we go. So that is Jennifer Gittens. We did this some years ago, probably about 4 years ago, and parents were very excited and teachers were excited. Teachers are also excited because they were thinking of their children. And adults, I'm going to ask you to look back. It's very important that you look back. And I want you to start writing in the chat, just jotting down your ideas just in case you forget it because you're not at the developmental stage. But things like, do you have children born in the months August to January? Are you born in those months? And how many children do you have, or anything that comes to mind? And of course, teachers too. So we just go through the objectives because I think this is important. And it's to equip the educational sector and families with knowledge on child and adolescent development and young adult to make informed input into the public health approach. Because the public health approach you're looking at the individual, but how parenting affected the individual, how education affected the individual. So there are things that can put people at risk for not doing well, and they're protective factors. If we do it right, people will do well, right? The worst being somebody getting ill because of what they're doing or behaving very badly, right? Creating joyful learning environments which promotes youth self-esteem of connectedness to school, hope about their future, and the will to succeed socially, emotionally, academically, all that is needed. Okay, so they say that a good social emotional intelligence can sustain that academic performance. But a high grade can't sustain your behavior necessarily, right? So this will result in lessening the risk of failure and dropout. And there's a lot of literature to show that. Morris County, New Jersey schools, higher academic schools in the US, they changed some of their policies. They opened up for teachers to have social emotional learning information, as well as parents, as well as teenagers. And these high scoring children were bullying, they were self-harming. And they saw the difference when the campus was happier and everybody was, having better relations, which helped them to open up that brain space to do work and their creativity, right? So the rationale, and I'm looking at the Caribbean, I'm looking at specifically, yes, Tobago. If you focus and zone in on how you could do your schools in Tobago, maybe that would be a research for Trinidad, for Jamaica. But all of us have to look at what we're doing, because it can't be always the paper is right, the exam is right, but the human is always wrong or broken. And Dr. Jane Healy says that in Your Child's Growing Mind. So you would have read the rationale. I don't think I have to read it for you, but it's very important if we want to solve this business of youth, risk of mental ill health, and involvement in crime. So you have some kids, they're not involved with crime, but they're sick. And they have 7 1s and 8 1s in your country and mine. They're high scorers. So we want a healthy child who is succeeding and behaving properly. This is my concern. So the developmental psychologist looks at growth throughout the lifespan. Of course, I've specialized only in the area from in mommy's tummy, in utero, to about 25 to 30, because 18 by brain and biology is not adult. So we have to check our expectations, all right? So we don't want human beings failing. A lot of us as adults and parents would have gone around saying, I didn't do well, but school is not supposed to be fun. They just have to do it. They just have to learn a hard work ethic. Caribbean, I'm not taking away a hard work ethic. It's an important thing. We celebrate that, but it has to be age appropriate, to give every child and every human being that attempt to try at their best with the good brain God gave them, right? So brain research tells us loud and it tells us clear. It is more than the family. And for the same reason that you want children to get high scores in school, school is affecting their chemistry and their brain chemistry. And that's why schools have to be careful. And parents, you have to be careful, because we have some of the old practices where we say, it never kill us. We did that and it never kill us. But it could have been harmful. And I think as children, some of the things we thought was unjust or a little too harsh. So let's look at the factors. The public health approach, please, everybody who is attending today, I'm asking one favor. Attend next week, Tuesday, and listen to Dr. Ulrich Johnson. It's our lives we are saving and our children's lives and well-being. We don't know who our children will marry. We don't know who they're going to work with. And when they step out there to have a good time, we don't know what's happening to them. And all children, regardless of ethnicity, race, class, who have money and who don't have money, most people are built with very good brains, right? So if we've seen too many of us have a problem, we have to check back our tool. Because if you have a signage by a roundabout, and the way you did whatever the yield or whatever, you see everybody crashing, we might have to check where we position the sign. These experts, and I want you to see it because there's this talk about, and I listened carefully to Mr. Quincy Joseph, and he works with youth. And I listened carefully to Dr. David Muhammad. And I will deal with some of their concerns and try and connect these dots, because their information was also very helpful to me, because since developmental psychology is looking at every area that affects human development, okay, to see how it impacts. So these experts in Germany, Britain, Turkey, Croatia, USA, and Japan, they're saying this about their boys, okay? Societies also have too many of their young people failing at their educational pursuits. And of special concern is the underachievement of male teens at risk for safety. Do we see any connection in this slide? So as we go along with the slides, see if you could think of Tobago, Trinidad, Jamaica. Okay, brain functions. Why the joy of learning? Why the joy of learning? And we're going to do a little. No, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have waded through some of the information from user-friendly people, Dr. Jane Healy, Your Child's Growing Mind, Different Learners. I've looked at peer-reviewed articles that has tried to explain to teachers and psychologists like myself, in user-friendly ways. But look at the temporal lobe. Where language is, memory is, hearing, and emotion. You cannot separate the emotion area from a child reading. Sometimes we're saying the child is not reading at a standard 2 level, but they're really in standard 5. Some children are so traumatized with reading, we couldn't even know whether they could read or not. And then reading takes quite a while. We expect a certain reading at 3, when right up to 8 years old. And early child, we signed on for early childhood in Ghana for 8 years old. And that's including now the new brain information that they know, and it includes our boys. So we can't just say there's a maturation issue for boys, but not meet that issue. So why joyful? Yes, the very brain is made up of all of this for us to learn. And the human brain takes the longest to mature. And children hear us predominantly through their feeling. But as adults, we're like, well, what you think is what you think. I don't care. All right. And I'll get more into neurons a little later. But just look how language is tied up with memory. It's memory and emotions. Okay. Told you that the human brain takes the longest to mature. This is some of our girls who graduated in Form 5 from St. Andrew High in Jamaica. And of course, everybody wants to leave at Form 5 because no, not everybody. Some want to because they're tired, they're burnt out, they're unhappy. They feel I can't go anymore. But we really must be trying to keep them, because the social order can get a little twisted when 16-year-old girls go out to meet much older people in university, and so for boys. I think we looked at the academics, but we didn't look at the psychosocial cost. So the emotional area, on one hand, they're saying emotions going like this, but logic is down here, because logic takes a time to balance with emotions, and that makes them vulnerable for their decisions, right? So mental health and wellness for small island territories, I think that the expert psychiatrists and some clinical psychologists, they have concerns. But again, they don't want to be labeled. and they don't want to feel that, they're interfering. But let me say this. Internationally, they're saying scholastic development stayed over there. That's everything teaching, learning, curriculum, and that type of thing. And human development, helping professionals, social workers, guidance counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, medical doctors, they stayed on the other side. But internationally, they're saying it's one human being. We need to come together. We need to have discussions, teams of us, for the benefit of the human being. So joyful learning for me is that the child is attached to their parent. I'll say, parents, if you're listening, some of you know in every family, don't feel bad. I'm very humble when I talk about family, because you can't just say the family is not doing well, because everybody has some kind of struggle with parenting. And some parents are very sick. Some parents have started off at zero. It's just how life is, and we want better for our countries. And so there's a song that goes, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, and get a straw to fix it, and they go right back to the straw. If we want better family life, if we want men and women doing better in our territories, and we are the people of fun and sun and music and art, and we have so much going for us, I shouldn't have to explain joy. If we want these things, then if we raise teenagers, sadly, what kind of parents are they going to be? And if we raise children from the primary level to feel they're not good enough, what kind of parents are they going to be? So we're in a circle, we're in a cycle, right? So parental attachment is important. If it's not even the parent, a granny, a auntie, a uncle, somebody good to you, attaching to them, and the child knowing you're my secure base. You'll be firm with me sometimes, but you'll be very loving and caring, and you will also listen to me. And so no physical abuse, no emotional abuse. That's part of the joyful learning experience from home and also in schools. The literature says it. Bullies are not just children in school. Unfortunately, we have adults as bullies in school, but we tend not to talk about it. We tend to do training for just the children. And that's also international. Maturation. This is very dear to my heart. So we always talked about entrance age, and we said, oh, we just do this because that's what the culture do. It's not like that. It's supposed to be a scientific understanding, and it's supposed to match and adjust when you change your curricula and your curricular requirements. Again, the child at the center. So school entry age is important. We did that on meeting the curricular needs, age appropriate information, so I can really show my brightness as a little girl or boy, right? And I think I'm in keeping with discussion with MOE, Trinidad and Tobago Ministry of Education on their cultural transformation, because the United Nations has sustainable goals. And one of it is the right for all children to receive an education without discrimination on any grounds, including low academic achievement. And Trinidad and Tobago is a signatory on it. But how are we going to work that out? When at 11 or 12, no, 10, 11 or 12, if you don't get a high grade, you go somewhere else that nobody likes. And Form 3, you have to be very bright for those choices, and lower 6. So maybe, all I'm saying, I'm not asking anybody to change anything today or tomorrow. I know it's a big political discussion and not everybody shares my views, but let's spread the information, because reasonable citizens will make reasonable decisions, right? So joyful learning. Let's see. Yes. Why is it not doing it? Okay. Oh, I did fanciness and don't know how to use it. Okay, no problem. Role of maturing is thing there, curricular. Okay, it gave me that again. Okay, it doubled up. All right. Let's go. Okay, that star doubled up on me. I am sorry. Okay, so we dwell on that slide, and then you tell me what you think about signing on to that in the chat. Right. So identity was an issue for Dr. David Mohammed. It's in joyful learning. Everybody needs to know their history on these lands, and we'll go in depth in it for the various ethnicities, but it's there. Respect for play. Children learn through play. You're first, I'm second, last. That's math right there, right? And low stress environments. And yes, if I get an assessment and I don't do well, please don't tell me I'm non-academics too early, because my brain is growing and I'm changing. And if I fly away from the Caribbean, I hear that I'm bright, right? So humans want to learn and can achieve in all domains. So yes, genes, we talk about genes a lot. Oh, the child was born with this. That's true. Children are born with certain things. But you can turn it on for good or bad. Some children in a high-rich environment, never, those genes don't get expressed. So that we have to be careful about environments. When did this, they used to study adults' brains, they're studying children's brains now, and they're doing more and bringing out, the neuroscience is bringing out more and more research on it. So they have been using fMRIs, so you see the function of it lighting up and what's happening. And that's why they know they also need joy, because they know when they test it and they have fear. Now they're testing babies in nurseries, cortisol, too much cortisol on the tongue. When they check babies in nurseries, they close down the nursery in certain countries, right? I told you that the years for adulthood is 18, is not 18, it's approximately 25 to 30. And you include the differences of boys with that. Now, what do we have similar with youth in problem? So you can check this slide, because the development research, what I like about it more than the theories, I'll show you when it's series and then I'll show you when it's brain. They're saying that this age group is vulnerable. They have some power, but they have not reached full logic, full reason on knowing what they want to be, what they want to do, and a lot of things is through emotions. Yet we're seeing that that young people involved with crime is somewhere between 14 and 29 in Jamaica. The research is somewhat similar in Trinidad, somewhere between 14 and 29. You know what's similar again? They consider themselves as not getting non-choice schools, and they're predominantly boys, okay? So we have to look at that. So they're at risk, and some children who did very well, some, not all, they are at risk for mental ill health. And so some psychiatrists are very concerned how many high-scoring teens are in their office. So genetics loads the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. And when they say trigger for good or bad, if you treat the child well and the child had some issues, the child can still survive. But you could also offer it. Now, all this drinking, and we say, okay, it's culture, drinking and smoking. Not that anybody should really excess in it, but really children should not be tasting liquor at 14. They will find it after a while. You give the information, but those brain cells that I told you is not adult yet, we are actually destroying what we want for schooling, learning, and behavior. They'd prefer people start drinking somewhere over 21 to 25. Because they know they won't get addicted. But you start at 14, you get addicted, all right? But we accept that pornography, alcohol use, early use. Now, I think it was Dolly and Associates, I'm not too sure, don't quote me, years ago in the papers, they did a research on the leading boys' schools in Trinidad, and they asked them, why are you involved with these things? And the first thing they put down in the bullet point wasn't parents, they put school stress. So I've been following the literature here, right, on the road. Dysfunctional family life and undue school pressure, two things. So those are risk factors. Again, Dr. Ulrich Johnson will do that. I'm not the expert on that, but that's why I'm interested as a development. So our brain is plastic. It means it can take in things. We have God-given potential, all of us. We might not score the same at the same time, the same grade, but you keep working with us and we can get it. But we need systems that allow us to do that. Okay, so I watched that thing with Bolt yesterday, and he was on the extreme sport. They were interviewing him, and they kept asking Bolt. I think they thought he probably took some drugs between a period because he wasn't doing well. And Bolt kept saying, I started young. And so that 2014 before I started shining, I think at 2018. In that period, I wasn't taking it seriously. I was young, I was playful, but I learned from failure. And my coach held on to me and he kept with me, but I learned some of the failure was good. So I'm not saying that the problem with us is that in our school system in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, Where we put failure, it's like the child will never get a chance again because I've gone to somewhere bad. Bolt had the luxury of failure because he knew he's going to be helped to be great. You see here again, emotions, brain, child, and learning. Dr. Jane Healy, she graced your shores here, Trinidad and Tobago. I think we had 2 experts that graced your shores years ago. Dr. David Elkan, who was invited by Lego in Sweden and all that to say, is this toy appropriate? He was here in 2010. Dr. Jane Healy was in 2011, along with Karen Bart Alexander. Karen is a real warrior for her country, boy. She worked on teams with us. And Georgia Donaldson, another Jamaican colleague of mine, and we worked on these conferences, and over 300 people came and educators came, and I asked, what happened? We have to act after information. So let's do the most important slide. Let me try and be a little slight neuroscientist here. The brain for childhood is different from that from adulthood. By structure, it quickly, you see the immature neuron on my left, and you see the mature neuron on my right. So everybody wake up. This is the most important thing before you sleep, because I know it's after 6, not really good for the brain. But in childhood, and that's why Piaget, the founding father in developmental psychology, said, yes, we know children. Yes, children can do stuff, but give them a chance, because it's not going to be an exact science that at 7 years old, a child can just think concretely, or at 11, they'll just think abstractly. He said there's a continuum, be guided by the child, right? So we have dendrites, axon, and synapses, one neuron. Now, billions of neurons in the brain, and in childhood, it's going to prune far more than adulthood, because in your mommy's tummy, it was like a plane, like a blank stretched out piece of paper. But it crumbled up to be this brain as the brain started to organize to go to higher level thinking. Dendrites would bring that information in. The axon would make sense of that information, and synapses will be pruning. And this will be firing off other neurons and other neurons to specialize to go to higher level thinking and reasoning. But they said that the cortex region in the brain for the human takes the longest to mature. That's the one for your academics, so your logic and your planning and your everything, your movement, everything. Myelin, what is the importance of myelin for children? So if you type in myelin, you might get for everybody. For children, they noticed that myelin was this thing for transmission speed. When the baby come home and the head going like this, it steadies the head, steadies your limb. Myelin works in the limbs. And remember when you had that big print for children to read? It's because those eye muscles weren't ready to focus on small print yet. And we were rushing them to do small print, or giving them licks because they couldn't read. No child was supposed to be hit with read. And boys would have fared off worse in our history. So myelin, it don't know about SE, common entrance, if you want to buy a spiral curriculum. It just does its work in childhood. All right. So myelin is that real important chemical for us as parents and adults to know about learning. So the fact that the child scored 40 now, it don't mean forever the child is going to go score 40, because as you see that white fattish substance is insulating. You notice you hardly saw any on the immature neuron. Now, while the physical brain is somewhere looking like adult at 5 physically, not by function. Cognitive development, thinking. Piaget said that the child's thinking is different, but they made Piaget irrelevant because we wanted to have the baby geniuses. So anybody theorists that came after that? So Vygotsky, he said, okay, the parent can help the child, the teacher can help the child to go to higher level. But even then he was cautious too. All right, the synapses, that pruning now. It's moving from the dog is woof woof to the dog is a dog. There are various types of dog, and you go right up. But that takes time. And when you damage this kind of process by a lot of crying and hits, and you're not supposed to know this right now, then that joy that is needed to make these neurons grow nicely and talk to each other and specialize. They say that if you don't feed a baby properly, food deprivation, it's a problem. They say too much information bombarding the neuron is as bad as not feeding a child. Now, what about little boys with this smiling that they noticed? So it's different things happening for girls and boys. So girls actually, not that anybody built an education system for girls, because girls weren't educated first. So we don't want to swing the pendulum this way or that way. We want kind of stay a little moderation in the middle. So the girls now, they had those finger muscles and sitting long and listening, even if they're bored, listening long. They had more of that in them. But the boys' testosterone couldn't manage all of that thing in early childhood. And those coordination for the fine motor skills, it says in the literature that this comes in later for boys. So it begins, myelination is a neural tube. The baby, that's the thing, that brain is forming. Careful what you eat, careful what you drink, for male and female now, in terms of when you decide to have a child, because also you can, by excess of drinking and smoking and things, damage what you want to for the child, right? So you see, it says it develops up to the 20s because it's moving very slowly. I tell you something, the research also shows that in the primary school year, somewhere between that 10 and 12, the rapid growth you had in early childhood. So you have a period, you have sensitive periods, you have rapid growth, and then the child is, assimilate, he talked about your senses you have already and accommodate. Okay, I'm hearing the new information from Swapp, but I know some of it from Teachers College, or I know some of it because I read it on social media. So you're going to accommodate some more now. But for the child, at the end of primary, they say it's slow down. And that's when we turn on the heat to sort out for school. And for boys, big more trouble. So that I told you that myelin allows the brain to process information, and that children's brains are different from adults. And what about our boys? This was a party they had and they were dressed up like a clown and they were teenagers, right? Child's visual apparatus mechanism last to be insulated. That's boys and girls, all right? And give myelination a chance before challenging an underdeveloped nervous system. This nervous system is very important. And this is linked to behavior and crime. And this is linked to excess drinking and excess smoking and always sad and mental ill health. We want to prevent mental ill health. But there are clinical psychologists and those kind of people to help, and psychiatrists. These are modern times. It don't take you 40 years to get help. Please go and get help when you need it, right? So why are our boys we're not seeing them in UE? And the world is discussing that, but some people are closer to it because they have made adjustments for the boys. So in a lot of things, language area, fine motor skills, girls 3 years ahead of boys. Girls have more neurons devoted to language in the brains left. Now, I know some of the academics is here. You might see some of my late date things, but some of the things with brain, as you look and you look and you look, it's the same brain. Dr. Boys Adrift, Dr. Sachs said, everything has advanced for boys, but boys' brains are the same brains 30 years ago, and they like to climb tree and run up and down and use their big muscles, right? So brain development for boys and girls, the visual cortex of the brain, well, here it's saying that, is remarkably different for a boy at 14 versus a girl at 6 to 10. So you see that gap, right? But the spatial memory, the men catch us on and boys catch us on. They're very good spatially with graph, map, distance, and assessing it. Very, very good with it, right? Language is our thing, but poor men, they can't hear so much of my chatting. And I'm racing through it a little bit because I don't want to keep you long either. We want to get into some of the questions. So now I looked also at German and American research. Now, America disagrees with Germany, but Germany, and Britain, they have the top school, middle school, then trade school, right? So they use their numbers. They use their grades to get right down to the age of the child to see who is always doing well. And they say it's the older child in class. Now, when I say this, please don't run out and just start repeating your children. It takes far more discussion than that. But some children will have to do an extra year. Okay. So the German children aged 7 years, I want you to think of your 5 years here in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want us to think of our 6 because we -1 at the end. So we both have our children going in somewhere at 11, right? Some people even try 10. That's dangerous. But high grades on exams at the primary school. They were placed in secondary gymnasium, which would be like our top school, because they were older, and those that came in older they tended to do better. Why? Because the brain could handle, children's brains are different from adults, meaning this. If you're 14 and a 13-year-old boy liked you off, you're like, oh, he's baby, or the boy might do the same. But when you are in your late 20s and your 30s, you see it a little different. You're hanging out with people a little older because that brain is not doing that daily work that like childhood, right? So they're saying that the younger counterparts went to moderate academic and trade schools. Can we see any match in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago? Now listen to this. Numerous risks associated with children beginning too young. And when is this young? In our policy, it says if the child turns 5 or turns 6 by December, they can come in. That does not favor, that is even killing boys even more. That does not favor boy or girl, because we have to look at what we're asking them, the work we're asking them, and the big school environments. Why couldn't they stay in early childhood with their small, with a teacher could give them a little more hug, and they could have play and naps and stuff. And even if you keep infant 1 and infant 2, which is the language here in Trinidad, remember they're early childhood children. So attention span issues and lots of extra lessons for those who are younger. You can test it in your house. Who got the prize? In your school. I have done some research in the schools and the teachers are amazed. I said, give me the children that's sickly, not doing well, not getting good grades, and just check the office and see their birth date to the month. And they say, what, you're in Zodiac? I said, no. It has everything to do with the month the child was born, because a curricula is like a Scrabble or a Monopoly, senior or junior. You have a suggested age rate, and parents need to understand that, but because we need to explain to them from the schools. And you always put in a little challenge in a curriculum. So if you're 5, your curriculum might be asking questions at 5.5, near 6, but here comes in the parent with their 4.5 child, our boy. So we have to be careful on that, right? See, we see here again, special education, emotional play, and diagnose. How many of our boys who are in crime are born in these months? I did a survey when we had the first thing in the when we had a child development conference, and it was Gordon Husbands. I think he was very helpful back in the day, and really appreciate all these people who, you know, wanted to listen to me and work with me and collaborate with me. And most of these boys that were in the place for youth, the Correctional Institute, they were born in these months. Okay, so they'll see suicide. So on the other hand, we look at the society and we say, oh, those people. And then, so all of us are at risk, even sometimes when our children do well, because suicide is an issue. And Japan is saying 15 to 25 years old. And they're looking at the grade you started school. So that's why I want to share this information. We see it here again, Dr. David Elkine. And we see other people have weighed in on it. Children have not gotten enough time for maturation to do its work. Okay, I'm going to share with you a father's perspective, right? Okay.
The desperation and fear I felt for my own sanity and security and stability to solve the situation I was left with for my 3rd son. Discarded by the school without any recourse, fearful and concerned, we see the education system failing by the high number of crime in this country, and more alarming, the high percentage of youth perpetrators and loss of young lives. I searched for a solution psychologically. Here I learned the importance of joyful learning and brain development in the context of maturity and the difference of this maturity between the genders, boys and girls. And most importantly, my son understood the time this development takes for a young man. He became aware. His outlook and his attitude became so positive, and the relief of a new perspective of learning and the knowledge for him he can still achieve, and that the doors sadly closed by the school gladly can be reopened again with opportunity and promise, made both my son and I realize that a different approach is needed. He responds better in a smaller and even one-on-one environment. The school during the COVID-19 period, needs a call out to be addressed. Whatever processes the school use as indicators by the school during the COVID-19 period needs a call out to be addressed. My son was discarded by a school to find his way if he was so inclined. But what if he didn't choose to believe in himself and fight for a few second chances available by my means? Question.
Right. So theories now, this is a theory, this is not brain now. The brain, the heart pumps blood and the brain is a learning machine, says Dr. Jane Healy. But Piaget wanted naturally occurring digestion. They wanted us to watch children as they were doing it. And so Sweden has this thing that they do in class. If they're doing, for example, fractions, and they were doing it in a particular way, they're able to say to parents, you know, when we ran the research, out of a class of 25, 18 children did not get the concept of fractions, how we were doing it. So we will put it to another term or another year. Now in our system, you have to race to get to the end of primary school exam. So nobody not putting anything away. So now the child is leaving the process without we feel that this is just this one child having that. When and extra lessons too will not let you also know, but nobody is going to tell a parent not to do extra lessons in this environment. So he said, rote learning is going to be the thing if it's beyond the child's current level of knowledge, right? So let's look at these this slide. What health professionals want is the brain that looks at the top. You can get a high challenge, but with low stress. Because the blood leaves the top of the brain and it's setting, you know, the ear, nose, and throat problem and all of that. And we just say it's milk and cheese. I learned it also has to deal with stress. Now, stress, anxiety, and learned helplessness. What is a learned helplessness? They say that you can put some fishes in a fish tank, and every time the fish is swimming for the food, you just drop a block. If you keep dropping that block, the fish never swims for the food. And that's how we face math too. A lot of people say we can't do math because we were so traumatized by it. You know, so we want challenge. The brain needs a challenge to grow. These things, hearing, seeing, challenge, reading, singing, dancing, moving, very important. But we want it to be age appropriate because chronic stress to the brain. And I'm saying, parents, it breaks my heart to see when children drop into mental ill health. It looks like it's worse than cancer. Because when some people have cancer, they're able to still work. People will talk to them. They can still pay their bills. When you're that badly with a mental problem, you know, people don't even want to be around, you know, you drop into poverty really quickly, you know, and parents cry and they weep because mental ill health is not good. We see that parent who lost her child to suicide. It's that and more. So we have to be careful because the same learning problems we think they have and they're not ready can be caused by our pushing at home and our pushing at school without reasonable moderation. All right. Serotonin, yes, makes you feel good, happy. You don't want to damage that. And this is what we're seeing and we live it. So all of us just have to be truthful to ourselves. There's nobody to blame here. The system we have had it for over probably 80 years or more. We had exhibition, then you had A-level, O-level from the Brits and stuff. We have to check these things. And then we have an old system and we buy sometimes we buy things that's American to put on the thing. We have to be careful because we have to look at our system and then we say where there are some good things about it, we have to know what to keep. So motivation. So this thing about a child don't want to learn and a child lazy. Most people don't believe that. It's just how we do it. And what we're asking them. If you want to ask my 3-year-old child to do a clock because your curriculum says it's time to do a clock, and then we say there's something wrong with the child, we have to check that, right? So motivation is built in the brain. We all want to do well. We all want to be known for what we do in our careers. And I am not saying either. I hear the multiple intelligences. Careful with the multiple intelligences. It is true. But you can't run a little test, SEA test, or Form 3 choices test because you load them out a lot of things in Form 3 and then you tell them they're not good enough to do the sciences. They have to be on this line. And then says multiple intelligence, boy, the child not learning that way. That's not what the gentleman did his test for. It's over a period of time and seeing many different things. So we have to be careful in how we say, how we view multiple intelligences. Now, physical punishment, we call for it now because we don't know what to do. And I'll give you a story. In Sweden, at that time, the teachers were still visiting homes. It was still like a village. I dare say they might be doing the same. And so I met this other teacher, and she had a mother and a son come from some part in Africa. And the law in Sweden is that you don't hit in the home or school. They didn't just say school. And they became the Scandinavian countries became more peaceful than many other regions. And Europe said you're going to raise vipers. Well, 50 odd years later, they have an article called, and you must Google it, very interesting because these people were Vikings and stuff. Sweden, a generation without smacking. And they were more peaceful. So she said to me, this young man is in his teens and he's giving her trouble, and he thinks he's giving her trouble because he knows as a new society she can't hit him. And she hears that the mother is hitting at home, but she doesn't want to offend the mother. So she's asking me, she's Caucasian, she's asking me, how should I approach the mother so she doesn't feel offended, but she can't do it anyway because she'll be in problem with the law. But I'm not going to say it like that. And we talked about it a little. And she was alone with him. And you know what the teacher said? I want her to stop hitting him too. And I want him to see that both of us are doing the same thing. And he's in a new country. He doesn't have friends yet. He might just be acting out as a teenager. And I said, well, if you say it like that, go to her and try and talk with her. She invited me only weeks after to see that same young man in a play, who was very calm, changed his behavior because two people came together to make life better than him. All right? So don't ask for licks. And licks, you can hit a child. If you tell a child you can't, I don't like that behavior, I don't think I'm going to allow you to do this, that hurt far more. But licks build aggression. So be careful with it. There's a time and a place, and I don't even know, I want to say there's a time anymore. Okay, the National PTA. Zena, Princess Warrior. I've known her for years and always trying to do the best and put forward parents' views. So I have her in the picture with her St. George team, I think, from the National PTA, but reduce depression and anxiety. Somebody said they had anxiety. They're seeing that you could have developed that in childhood or a little later for a traumatic event, right? But an enriched diet and getting that help, going in, talking about it, learning to breathe, doing different things. Some of your children and your teenagers are suffering from it and you don't know, right? There's cognitive behavior therapy. They're looking at trying to change behaviors one at a time. Sometimes people need a little drug to hear the therapy. They might need it forever. Family therapy and managing your study and your work, okay? That's me with my last child in a facility that keeps children and their parents and not, they don't call them teachers, and supporting people with lots of toys and everything. You don't have to be rich in Sweden and have any toys. Every community has a play center with toys. You don't have to even buy toys and put in your house. That was there. So child and adolescent development, solid to work. So my thing is we need to collaborate together as scholastic people and human development people. Okay, so I did that checking of the understanding earlier. Spiral curriculum, how many people understand what the spiral is? Should it have been placed upon a high stakes exam environment? Can we divorce ourselves from the exam and say, well, that's not the exam, that's the curriculum? Because it's confusing teachers too. And when you try to research on it, it says be careful with it, because if you have these high stakes exam, high stakes mean you have to get a score to go to a particular place. You lose or fail. Then people are going to jump the foundation stuff to go to the top for it. So we have to be careful, or we have to rework the spiral in a way that standard 1, standard 2, and so teacher will say, we just stop in here. And the exam, it just stop in here. It's going to be more age appropriate then, right? So readiness, lack of focus, all of these things, we see all of that. Elitists are non-ailing, failing, and misbehaving. Dr. Jane Hill said, why you always find the child broken? And she wasn't talking about us, she was talking about her society. Let's relook at our tools. All right, preschool stage, we're not going to stay on that because I'm going to teenage stage, but just for you to know, it's sleep, it's play, it's not an academic institution. And unless that mommy or daddy said something happened in mommy's tummy, there's something, then you go off to say, okay, let me monitor, let me test and whatever, but not just because they're not reading fast. You have to look at other things, right? Children, again, all colors, ethnicity, and I will talk about something, Dr. David Mohammed, because it's very dear to my heart. Industry versus a feeling of inferiority. And we want the identity for the kids to feel, I'm industrious. You're owed that when you're that young, because I'm going to help you to win. But I'm not good. I don't come from anywhere good. I don't go to no good school. That's not good for our safety in countries, right? And adolescents don't know at Form 3 really what career they want. We can explore it, but they should not be losing subjects. We should have subjects on block. They need every little thing. They might score 1 in it. But that same brain that we want to challenge needs foundational knowledge in a lot of areas. So when you get older and you're going to do it at a higher level, you have that knowledge to go. So a young man, a case study with a young man, Form 3, a QRC, told he wasn't bright enough for sciences, went to 6th form, did sociology, went to Canada, did sociology, and looked at his professor and said, I don't want to do this, I want to be a doctor. His mother came back to me in Trinidad and said, this boy is crazy, where am I going to get that money? And he don't have any subjects for doctor. And his professor said, come back, I'll matriculate you, come and do the 3 sciences and then go back home. He did that, and he went to that thing in Grenada, I think. He went to the medical school, became first in his class, and he wasn't supposed to be the bright one with medicine. Then went to England, came first, and he now living in the States and married and did research for COVID and breastfeeding. We have to be careful who we say not smart, right? So the middle, that 8 to 12 years old, the impact of SEA, we can brainstorm later. Adults brainstorm how we solve it, but at the same time, give the joyful learning now, give the age appropriate things. Let us retool again at home and in school and talk to each other on it. So children want to make things well. They want to do that. They don't want to hear they're not bright like their friend. And youth go and say, I wanted to be a physiotherapist. Then when you reach up, no. I want to have a store and I want to sell equipment. Or no, I wanted to be an artist. No, I want to be a doctor. No, I'm a doctor. I want to be an artist. That's appropriate in their development. But when they lose subjects, confusion reigns. Because you get to lower 6, you don't have that subject. You can't do this. So we have to look at it, right? The 20s and 30s, they're very tricky years because they're no adults, but they're still living with you. And we become the sandwich generation where we're looking after our parents and we still have our young adults and we're not getting on with them. Try to have the patience. They still don't reach your age. Try to understand the damage that was done to them from early childhood to now, which also affects their behavior. And when they get information, when the teens and the young adults get this information, as the father said, you could see the light in their face. They said, one boy up in Port of Spain, he went to one of the private high schools and he was still having a problem, boy. And when he looked at his brain, I said, but you're the youngest in the class. You were born in October. And you're this age, that's probably why you're having a difficult time. And his father said to him, but you don't use it as an excuse because Mrs. Swapp said that. Don't use it as an excuse because you're wasting my money and ting. And the boy started to scream and shout. He said, you didn't hear her. I'm not stupid. I'm not lazy. I was young and I didn't know that. And he wept and the whole room was quiet. I want to bring the stories to you so you understand what's happening, right? Now, when we look at young people finishing high school at Form 5 at 16, right? And they're thinking they're not bright again. And Jamaica was asking the question, well, what can they learn in the next 2 years if they never did well at 16? I said, the brain hasn't finished growing. So that thinking is a myth. That don't go so. And we know that as adults because we have changed again. Young men, and I hear most men, prefer good looks, cooking skill, and frugality. Well, we have a longer list. Considerateness, honesty, kindness, dependability, earning, and prospects. Young people need to know about them, and we need to talk with them, these things, and talk with them, because they're going to be dating, they're going to be choosing, and sometimes they don't mind hearing from us. They don't need us really that near, but they like to know that we think they're at a certain age, and they like to know their parents think good of them, and their teachers. So hear this about boys. Boys have said, they did a research on thousands of boys who got A's and girls who got A's. And they asked the boys, how do you feel when you see A? They said, when the teacher says, well done, when the parent says, well done, and when I see the A, I feel good. They asked girls the same thing. When I see the A, Men and women can check that out. All right, let me take a break here and see if there are any questions in the chat or anybody wants to say anything.
So during this time, we would take questions from the Facebook, if anybody has questions on
Very
Facebook.
interesting because these people were Vikings and stuff. Sweden, a generation without smacking, and they look at.
Okay, so persons have not asked their questions as yet.
As yet? Okay, so we can go on.
But
And
we want
then-
to encourage you guys right now to ask your questions, but even though we don't have any questions, we want to also, we have our own questions.
Okay.
So for me, I am asking, how can we encourage a balance between academic success and emotional well-being in children and in adolescents? I know that you spoke a lot about this joyful learning. So do you think that this would help to accomplish that balance?
Of course, because if we're more in tune in looking at the child and looking at the person who is doing it and children, and I'm not saying because the teachers, it's something like every child. Yes, you need to look at each child, but we still have to be just like as women. We'll say, okay, in a age group, knees hurt, back hurt, something hurt. Men might have something different. We kind of have an idea about children at a certain age level in a certain grade. And so that we want to do it in a way that they don't feel fair. You don't want to have a child who's having a difficulty reading go up to read. That child needs to read privately with you for a while till they feel they can read. That's joyful. But I must say to parents and teachers and policymakers and everybody, the first goalpost is check the school entrance age as it relates to what you want for your curricula and the type of curricula you have. Because you could do your best as a teacher, your best as your parent. If the child is not sitting in the right grade, many children, and they have to stay with their age group, they can be sometimes 6 months younger or 6 months older or a year. But you don't want to have a child 2 years older, 3 years older. And that's why the principal, I worked with the principal at the high school level because of, and I'm not saying repeat has helped a lot of people. So I'm not hitting out at repeat. But you want to try and keep them because that's how you get the behavior. They really need their age group. So I said to her, instead of sorting them by streaming again and say who bright and who not, don't do it. They've arrived in your high school, stream them by age so that they have friends. If 10 girls came in much older, put them together in that grade and keep the younger ones with the younger ones. And it worked out. And that form Y that she's telling you about, when all the whole school approached the learning, everybody heard the same information. They became first in the stream. And they were the girls that were older, but they felt bad. They felt like I was always done, so I got licks. I had to repeat 2 times. And they didn't understand about the months they were born. A lot of them were born in these months, August to January. So for joyful learning, we're looking at, as they said, entrance age, first base. After with the entrance age, you might have a little issue, but by then we're moving so closely with them. We're doing things to favor human development. And the teacher are telling you this. I have seen teachers who said, that boy, I don't want him back in my class. This is something, but I tell the parents to repeat him. Do I beg you? The boy comes back in the class a year older and she loves him. And she said, that's maturation. I said, yeah, that's maturation. So we have to look at that. Now, I want ethnicity is very, very important. Now, we have hard discussions in the Caribbean because we all have to be in this Caribbean and we all need to get along. And we like to look at things with a naked eye and say, these people are doing this because of this reason. Black youth in the Caribbean, and I dare say in the world, need to hear good things about themselves, better things about themselves. And if you look at single race countries, the research I showed you that said boys are at risk, they never said black boys are at risk there. They said their boys are at risk. And that's why Sweden, what they do, if their entrance age is 6, a boy can come in at 6.5, 7. It's a discussion with the teacher and the parent. Germany says he can come in 7 to 8. And it's not mandated. in terms of you have to come in at us. They talk, it's a conversation. Okay, so that Black teenager, and they have told me if they're, he's right, if they hear so much negativity, then they're not called to do anything good, and they're even more lethal. Now, people have suffered. I have had a gun put in my face. I have suffered. Okay, but I also know this. The young man that did it, who was on drugs or whatever, it's that we as a society and adults, we have not done enough to do our homework. We've asked them to work hard. We have to work hard. And so, yes, there needs to be, the research is clear internationally. Teach kids, no matter where they come from, their religion, their ethnicity, pour into them what's good about them. Call them to be a part of the citizenry and to make good choices. Okay, with manhood, if you destroy boyhood, then you cannot get manhood. So Quincy Joseph is right. If we have a lot of boys failing and we haven't adjusted anything, like Sweden tried to adjust, other people try to adjust, then how are we going to have confident men? And there are girls who are suffering, who are born in these months, but because of their thing coming in a little earlier, it's different. So today's youth have more stress, but less support. I get that with him. So adults need to come together to have these discussions and to say, how are we going to help children? Then there's this, in Jamaica, there would be the socioeconomic status. I came from poor and I did it and I got good grades, and why this person didn't do it. It's not as easy as that. We have to be careful when we're making these assertions. Sometimes a teacher once said to me, see, Camille, this poor student went to Howard University and got a scholarship and she's out of poverty. And when I look at the article, I say her mother is a teacher. She said, then what did the mother come from? I said, she has assets. There's elitism there. She comes from teacher. She have teacher friend. Teacher friend could help her. I'm not saying it's all that, but we have to think deeper about these things that we say about people. And then our young people, they are enmeshing. They want to get to know each other. They are socializing. So we have to be careful in how we are doing it, because development must be respected. Male, female. They say testosterone, testicles and ovary are different. Different apples have different color and different, but it doesn't make one better than the other. So whether we're going to talk about gender or we're going to talk about race, and religious institutions need to talk about how are they going to open up all these schools then, because Caribbean people look like it's the religious schools they want. Maybe that's what we need to give everybody. Trinidad, you're near to it. You have a convent in the south. You have a convent in the east. You have a convent in Port of Spain. You have a bishops in thing, and we don't have that in Jamaica. And I said, wow, they're closer to the solution. Why haven't they just expanded and made all children move from standard 5 to form 1 because they're ready to go and go into all the schools that Caribbean people want and pay tax for? Right? Suicide is a huge problem. We had an 8-year-old whipped, I think, not 8, I think it was about 10, whipped because he didn't think years ago. And this man who wrote this book, Dr. Donovan Thomas, he wrote the book and the boy killed himself. After his father whipped him for common entrance, he killed himself. He'll never be forgotten. So we have to be careful.
Right, sorry
Okay,
about that.
Can I ask a question?
We have a
Sure.
participant who has a, so we're gonna allow for Mr. George Bob to make his contribution. Then we have we have 2 questions actually in the chat, so we'll go to those.
That's right. Go ahead.
Okay, I must thank the doctor for you have gained a lot of benefits from her presentation here tonight. Dealing
Thanks.
with
I'm not a doctor, but thank you. Speaking to the future.
I
Go
thought you were. Oh, I saw Dr. something Swap or CW Swap. And okay, all right.
Yes.
All right. So I benefited from your presentation tonight, dealing with the science and skills and learning. Of course, coming to the end of your recent narrative there, you touched on something I was thinking about all the time. You have basically, of the last 2 or 3 lectures I've heard, much of the emphasis was on science and skill in learning. And of course, science and skills give you control of the whole world, but it needs religion and reason and spirituality to give it meaning.
That's correct.
And I've not heard much about the spirituality, the aspect of the thing, and the religious or the religion aspect of the thing, because I always think in terms of good faith and good conscience and all these other things coming to play, but not much emphasis as far as I'm concerned. And of course, you spoke about the ethnical aspect of the thing, and one of the issues that have been coming up several months ago in the Caribbean, the whole question of God being ethnically, or people being want to see God in their own ethnic image, and so all these I think impact on the whole question of mental stability and emotional stability and so on. And these things are supposed to be discussed.
Yes.
Got the impression that people are more emphasizing on the science and the skills and so on, etc., which really deals with functions. But the whole question of spirituality and so on deal with purpose. And if you don't have purpose, then everything goes askew.
You're very correct. And can I just answer that quickly? There's a slide I had earlier and I flew over it, where we're talking about the importance of religion in people's lives. Now, although I'm Christian, it didn't say Christian in the research, it said religion, right? But it is true. They've looked at studied teenagers. Now, at first they used to say that it was the opium of the people years ago. Now, psychologists are giving a lot of respect to religion now. They're saying that you have thousands of students, research was done, and they're going through some very bad problems, but the children who actually do very well through that bad period have a belief system. So yes, a belief system is important, but the church also has to look at this. I'm no religious institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. We accepted a labeling of using for sorting, that we're only going to take the best and the brightest, 90% and up, which leaves with you to Form 60 because you have to get 4 ones and all of that. And so our spirituality in the book of James and everything, we have to practice what we preach, because our young people, when they feel inordinate amount of stress, they're not treated properly, it is harder for them to believe. No, so the literature shows that parents, and listen to this, if you live what you preach, children will take on your belief systems because they see it around them. And so that's why when the church took this with the first set of schools, and then we said we're having 20%, we have that in Jamaica too. And some people can get in the 20% and all of that. I don't know if when Jesus comes, he's going to ask, where's his children who got 40%? Why are they feeling like losers till adulthood? So we have to live what we believe, and then our young people. So we do need, our belief system it's guided by what I do today, is praying before I even start to say, Lord, how can I get them to understand? And Dr. David Muhammad, he's Muslim, I'm Christian, but I was able to listen carefully to some of his views and to see that connection between what I am seeing. So if religious schools, people here, they will change from being Baptist to Catholic just to get their children in Catholic. So we have to really look at our belief system if we value it so much and say, are we using it ethically for the benefit of people? Because this is important. So I do take your point. Spirituality is a very important foundation, because when no friend on earth and no lover and nobody is there, God is with you. And whatever else belief system.
Right. We also have a couple questions in the chat. So one of those questions, and we want to try to run through them as fast as we can, because we don't have a lot of time. And we also have an attendee who wants to contribute to the discussion, so we'll allow her to come on. So I'm going to give you 2 of the questions so you can answer them back to back. So one of the is, if as a parent, I feel a teacher is pushing my child too hard and my child is not enjoying school, how would you suggest that I approach the teacher? That's one. And number 2, what is the relationship between child shaming and abuse in Tobago and the way that young people show up in customer service in Tobago, hostile and unhelpful?
Okay. So and the question that the lady asked, or the parent asked about not in keeping with, what the teacher is doing and how to approach the teacher. I have two young ladies, one is 31 and one is 25. And one went through the system totally, and one went public and then very private for high school. And I try to say to teachers, it's hard for teachers because they have 30 and well, depending on how much you have in your class, different parents talking with, plus their bosses, plus everything that's happening. But I had to go to some teachers, and at that time, God rest my husband's soul, he's passed. Both of us had to go and say, we have learned a lot, and we are not going to blame you. If she gets a low score, we are not going to blame you. We just want her to enjoy the experience. If she can give you the best 5 songs, please take it. I'm not coming to judge you. I had to tell them that in the early childhood, right? I had to say it at the primary level, and I had to say it at the high in a nice way. I am not judging you. I understand it takes time to learn. Yes, I want high grades like any other parent, and I want my children to do well, but I have a different approach I'm learning, and I just have to pray that things work out. Or if my child go to a school that I think is very dangerous, and I really want you to think about this. A principal had a lovely plant up in the east, lovely school. And she was very passionate about her children, but the school had a kind of name for it. We must stop naming schools where children are derogatory names. And she said, Mrs. Swapp, teachers don't even want to come here and have a meeting. Children out here, because of the name of the school. That's how bad it is. That's why we have to think about this. So talk with your teachers. Show them where you're at. Let's promote in every school in Tobago that they're going to get this information. Because when teachers get the information, they come and say, they're excited. They say, I write in a paper, I can put a little development in it, tell me, it's my own child. One teacher cried, she said, as a child, I didn't feel good. And I didn't realize I was doing the same thing. It's a human condition. Next question. I didn't remember it. They were asking me something.
The child shaming. So what is the
Child
relationship?
shaming. Okay, yes, let's deal with that. We have been
what is the connection between child shaming
shaming
and customer service in Tobago?
Put it this way, I am not just going to say customer service in Tobago, because as we travel, many of us talk about various different countries, what we see in ours, what we don't see in ours, but what is common is this. If we're going to scream and shout and haul and pull the children, and then we're going to say they're rude, the brain is learning that. And yes, we are going to be damaged going into offices and how to deal with people. And so all of us must work. I see it in some places in Jamaica. I see it in places in Trinidad. I really haven't spent enough time in Tobago to make that comment. But yes, all adults, we need a new approach. In Sweden, you can't hit a child. Some of the British parents were laughing with me because we don't, yeah. So at the bus stop, you can't even shout at the child. They said they're not raising anybody to come turn around and kill them. They had other ways to discipline. We can have new ways to discipline, because sometimes the child was tired. Sometimes they were scared. We forget what we're like as teenagers. They're not perfect, but if we talk to them and we respect them, here are the children that are doing well. We always talk about children not doing well. Most households where now parents are saying, I like my child, they're doing well, you see, and so. They're very moderate parents, they speak to them well. Sometimes they have to set some firm limits, but they give the child a voice and they don't rob the child of their dignity. No matter what they're going through, they say, okay, that was very bad. You can't do that again. That could be the courts. And you know what a woman said to me from a very challenged neighborhood in Jamaica? She heard me talking about you have to help your 18-year-olds and why, and the brain is still not an adult. It's a good thing I said that. When I was leaving, she ran me down. She said, my son stole something from a store, and I told him I'm not helping him with any lawyer or anything, because a big man do that, you go do it. And you say, brain not ready? You say he's not adult yet? Should I help him? I said, you have to correct him. You have to get help for him, but you have to help him, or he's going to go with another gang that is not doing good and joining it because you say you're not helping. So you have to correct him. I was a victim of crime, so I don't want it for anybody, but we also have to help our children. So no, don't be shouting and screaming and shaming them in schools and all of that. We don't need that drama. We just need at home. But parents, you have real problems, and I understand this. I was a parent for smaller children. Sometimes the pressure is tough. Speak to a friend. Try calm down and step away from it and then come back to it. And I'll say this to parents for teenagers too. We see, because they're big, we think certain things don't matter to us. If you don't know how to handle your life, your relationship life, you're promiscuous, you're having them see everybody you're dealing with, you think it not affecting them, all to the 20 little it affecting them. None of us perfect, but really try and leave them with things that they don't need to be getting involved in, so that they can do the schoolwork and they can feel good about the mother and good about the father and make their own judgments later down. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. And so we have a participant who would like to make a contribution. Question. We have Trelicia St. John. You can go ahead, Trelicia. While she's getting ready to come on and ask her question, we have one more. Are schools turning out unemployable youth? What impact does school failure have on gang activity?
There's a direct connection, international. There's a direct connection. Direct connection. When you fail, and look at it, because there's a common sense to it when we think about it deeply. That's why I said there's a hole in the bucket there, Liza. If children go for a chance, they don't have, something went wrong at home. School was supposed to be the safety net. Well, that's how Scandinavia sees it. Because they tell you a lot. It's not good for child development. They have it on their tongues. They all have a developmental talk with the child and the parent and themselves in terms of how thing there. If you come out of a stress parenting thing, as a child, I used to say to teenagers, and they love to say it, I said, you cannot speak to what you come out of, but you can speak to where you're going to. Let's say that again, miss. We like that. You can't speak to what you're coming out of, but you can speak to where you're going to. Now, if you go to school and school is as harsh as home, and school is ready to tell you you're not bright and you're non-academic and go, what are you going to do? They shouldn't. So we as Caribbean people, we are bright, we are dynamic, we have common sense, and we need to be truthful to ourselves. We have honestly watched peers who didn't get high grade and go away and is shining right here. And I don't believe yet insulting and saying, oh, no, you were to go to trade school and you and go here. That was a British thing that, again, that did not favor poor people. Everybody must learn everything. That's in Sweden. My child did woodwork at 8 and all the academics, and then the boys did sewing, and they switch again for terms. They learned everything. They started sorting them really somewhere between 16 and 18 to stay in school, but to lean to some areas you like, and you can always switch back. So that's why I'm passionate. That's why I'm taking this time to connect these dots. So a child is growing up, they don't hear anything good about their ethnicity. They're growing up, they're not getting good grades. The parents not getting along. So that's when go to Dr. Ulrich thing, because that is what's going. If we use the public health approach, then the school is going to look at themselves hard and say, what can I do to be more of a protective factor than a risk factor? Let's talk as a team. The family is going to do the same. Ads supposed to be on TV with the public health approach for violence. But you know what? Let me just say this. Politicians too kind of afraid of us too, like afraid I won't get no vote. Do I move SCA? Who is me, or are you going to move SCA? Or PEP in Jamaica. PEP now is telling continuous assessment. Careful what you're putting on the system. You're going to hold the grade from standard 2 to standard 5 to tell me what school I'm going to. So it's worse for boys then who don't wake up. You can't hold a grade against me for a placement exam. You have to look at these things. Go ahead.
And so we have one participant who's ready to ask her question. Trelicia, are you there?
Okay, yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
So I want to really thank Ms. Swapp. I mean, from starting off, my emotions has changed a lot during this conversation. One of the heaviest thing that weighs with me now is one of her opening slides, where she indicated or shared with us that genetics loads the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. Moving on from that, is my question is, how do you correct the mental digestion naturally using the Piaget theory? And if you can also tie that into the myelin sheath or the myelination neurons, the natural process of that taking place. So damage may have been done with the way how you parent, your expectations, or what you may come down on a child for. So your assessment is, okay, I need to do some damage control. How can we do that as parents using the Piaget model, the Piaget theory, and bearing in mind the natural process of the myelination of neurons?
Okay, so if damage has been done, and first you'd have to assess what that damage is. And so you'd have to go to one of, they call it helping professionals, whether you're going to go to a child psychologist, a clinical psychologist, a psychiatrist, but usually I think the clinical psychologist might refer you if it's beyond their scope, right? I give over information on development because I think there's a gap. So in Jamaica, some psychologists will say to me, okay, Camille, you study more about the school and how all the effects. This person you think could do it a repeat, or do you have a slide that we can show the school to say this is what you're thinking of? So that kind of collaboration, right? But for the child, when you say myelin, so myelin is growing and the brain is wonderful in terms of it can repair itself, but some things you have to be careful with. Childhood is the best time, yes, to repair. The best time to try healthy diet. If you have a belief system, go and pray with your child, not to scare your child, with your child. Get the psychology information, but you have to change the environment. Here, what we're not doing. We expect children to change, but we're not changing the environment. If something in the home needs to change, you have to be brave and you have to work at that a little by a little. And if the child's understanding it, you said, I don't have the answer yet, but I might be changing something. So it's better for you. In the school, I'll give you this. I went to a school, did a presentation on all of this for teenagers, not for the teens, for school staff. I didn't know much about the teens. The next day I went to the school. I asked, how were you feeling the day before? The children had sour face and don't want to stay here and hate here. The next week I went back and I ran a little research with the children. So how are things now? I don't know, Miss a little better. The teacher, they seem nice. I don't know what. I don't even have to trust them, but they seem to be very pleasant because the information on development is something you can check and you can assess. So work at changing the ways. I had to do that with my child. I had to make changes with my first, and I had to apologize. The first one, you always make a lot of mistake with. By the time the second one come, hopefully you're a little better, right? But be open to it. Piaget in his father learning in terms of saying how there are many other theories. There's Erickson that by gospel or whatever. You don't have to use anybody as gospel, but you have to be moderate to allow the child time if you wanted to develop and to say, even if you don't get a high score now, we'll work. What kind of help you want? And if you don't get it, but a little later you will get it. So work, if you knew where to change your environment, go and get some help so you understand what it is you're working with and be willing and open to change, because children, I've seen young adults in their family, 2 years not speaking. The young adult is now speaking to the parents and everybody. You know what a lady did? She had me over at her home and I had a fete. The fete was, let's talk about development and brain and feeling and emotions for all her generation. And everybody focused on themselves. And we are supposed to be in the generativity age, that anywhere from 40 plenty to near 60 something. It's called generativity. We're supposed to be giving back and looking out for people. So work on that and get the information.
Thank you.
Excellent. And we have one more question in regard to behavioral intervention. What role does the early intervention play in addressing behavioral issues, and how can schools integrate this into the curriculum at the primary school and the high school level?
Okay, at the primary school and the high school level, what joy, get more dress up, more play, even if you're in the classroom environment, get that social emotional learning. That's an element of it too for you teachers. They're saying now that teachers internationally are at risk for mental ill health. because it's a lot of stress, but it also becomes a lot of stress if the leaders and the policymakers won't sit with teachers to listen to say, what can I adjust while the teachers adjust? So play is the child's world. It's what they mean. So in Sweden, for example, the child don't get a numeric grade until somewhere like 11 years old, you know. They had international school asked me one time, they said, but I don't see a grade. I say, you're not going to see one. They're going to tell you the child is good in mental math, but struggles in probably, what you call it now, reasoning skills or whatever. They don't use numbers because they said they don't want to misassess people's children, right? So in these early childhood years, lots of nap, lots of play, lots of hands-on, lots of singing and dancing and all the things in the Caribbean that we do along with what we're trying to show them. We shouldn't even be trying to think of covering a curriculum. And then at that standard 1 level, going up, you still have to have a little play in it. And are you scared to read? Miss is not going to be upset with you, or sir not going to be upset with you because you have a difficult reading. You're going to have fun. And parents, when you're reading to your children, please, if you know there's a book in school, I know you're trying to help them. It happened to a pediatrician. And she was asking me, you cannot make them read the same book over and over again, the same book. And then when they go into the little reading in school, they're very disruptive because they've read that book 3 times. Who want to read a book 3 times? But you can get a book in the store that's near the same level. And another thing, when early childhood children and middle in the primary say they want to read fun books, please don't tell them that's below their reading level. Let them choose the books they want to read as long as it's appropriate. But don't try to put them to the higher level. Let them enjoy it without calling you every minute for the words. That's how you get the joy of reading. And at the high school level, this is a time when people choose the teachers they like for the subject, to show you how their brain works. The emotion way up there. And they'll even try and get a higher grade because they like the teacher. The teachers are going to have a kind of attitude to you. We should take it on personally.
So I was just going to intervene to ask you one of the questions that we had on Facebook. So one of those questions, what possibly happens to the child who at age 8 is constantly ushered from one instructional environment, like from the classroom to after school tutoring to piano classes, but they never really have time to play with other children?
That's a problem. And then you might have an only child. You have to look out for your only child and you have to have them play with some cousins and supervised plays. At the teen years too, they could study together from different schools. It works, but you're there. And you're like a little coach for them. Okay, have some play now. Okay, people study together like a play study party. The overshedding of children. All of us need a time to just stop, to think, to reorganize. So you don't want to bombard the brain. You want them to have some activity. But sometimes in our system, we want the coach want A, the art teacher and the sports and creative want A, the academics want A, and his child is at the primary level. Sometimes the child pushes, and sometimes if they're pushing and they can manage something, fine. And if you think they're overly doing it, then you have to check it out. But yes, you have to give, and they'll choose. I want to dance this time. No, I don't want to dance. I want to play football. They're choosing certain things, and you can allow. I'm not going to give you a prescription as a parent. Go with your gut, and try and find friends. Friends are very important, but good friends. Because if you don't learn to choose them well now with supervision, you choose very bad friends in those teenage years. Because now you just passionately want a friend, and you will take any friend. And it will be guided by the child. So you will see how much activity they can and can't do. And if it's overwhelming, they're not sleeping, they're not eating. You have to check that out, okay?
Excellent. All right. We want to thank you so much for your time. I think we have one more question on Facebook, and then we're going to round up this evening.
Sure.
So might there be an educational benefit of having cross-Caribbean high school student exchanges?
Oh, wow, that sounds exciting. Of course, there's going to be a benefit. And of course, I mean, guided again by, reasonable, adults who are thinking there, yes, there's so much we have to learn about each other. And it has only my children, yes, they missed home and there was some sadness that you're growing up without your cousins and whatever, but they have when they go to discuss with people, they're traveled, they have listened to different cultures, they have existed in different cultures. We got to know each other in the Caribbean, and we can make a peaceful society. We can have a peaceful society. We have to be intentional at thinking outside the box and not what we do with SEA. Let's just share the information on joyful learning and development and brain development and try to find some information. Don't Google baby genius. If the child is going to do well and they're bright, nobody's holding them back. But the majority of us are normally intelligent. So what you're trying to get is information to help you. What got us into trouble? We said the book couldn't teach us. The book can teach us a little something. It's not a prescription, but it gives us a guide for teenage, old age, whatever, it gives us a guide. And yes, we need to know because of the Jamaican school system. So Trinidad has wealth, and with all the money you spend in education, meals, don't pay for any subjects, and you're having the amount of crime we're having, and we are having, our economic situation is not as strong as you. But what do we do the same together? How we process our children through the school system. That's why I'm passionate. There is something there that we have to tweak and change. They had a girl, a video going where the girl did 4, the student lower 6. She wants to be an engineer. She did nutrition. She got 3 ones. And in nutrition, she got 3, and the school asked her to leave. We need 4 ones for lower 6. So a Trini friend said, we don't do that here. I said, we just take the best. I said, it's the same thing. Because if everybody score 1s and that child don't get it, then what's going to happen? And the father who spoke, his greatest worry was he didn't know how sad his child was not to stay in high school. Let me say this about boys, very important before I go, please. I know you have tried to listen to quite a lot, and thank you. I am saying to you, you cannot have teen boys who want to stay in school and not be on the road in trouble, and you deny them that because they don't have enough ones, when the literature says they're waking up at 16 to really take life seriously. Girls shouldn't be out there either. And a boy wept to me. He said, I played sport for the school. I got 1s and 2s, 8 subjects, and they told me to go, that it still wasn't good enough. And I came out of a challenged neighborhood, and my parents felt I behaved badly. That's why they did. And he developed depression, and he's still looking for a job. And it was through COVID. And now this other parent is talking because his son was thinking of, oh, what trouble can I get into? I just find boys who have problems like me. But when he learned about himself, he redirected to say, okay, but he misses his friends. Please don't tell me there are other institutions out there to go to. You don't want a child to lose their friend at 16 and 17 when there's an opportunity to stay. And you don't want a child in tertiary who is really not ready for tertiary or ready to hang out with adults. Because one young girl said to me, yes, I'm in university. I said, that's good. How are you liking it? She said, they lack team spirit. I said, team spirit? Is in talking to her, she decided not to go to lower 6 and upper 6. She was tired and she said, let me go. So she was still looking. She said, I didn't see it, miss. I really miss high school because I thought I was going to get the team spirit up there. She wasn't ready to go. So we are all adults, and we're educators, and we're policy makers, and we're parents to beg a civil net. Don't let just this be a talk shop. The first thing we have to do is spread the information across the system, and the religious system has to have a discussion. The justice system, Dr. Ulrich Johnson next week, Tuesday, will bring all of this together. I sincerely thank Quincy for sharing his life. I thank Dr. David Mohammed. I thank Tobago Civil Net and the team. What a wonderful team you have working with you. Latoya, thanks for being a patient teacher. You know, we have to come together. And of course, the Caribbean has to know more about each other and what holds us together. That's what Mia Motley is trying to change the education system. But I'll say this, before you root for a change, root for every household and school to have the information. Then the change becomes easy. That's how Scandinavia does it. They don't change anything till they've educated their people on what they're trying. Thank you for this time. It's been a long time. I don't know if anybody is still sleeping or...
No, we are still wide awake, actually, and we have had an excellent time listening to your presentation. And I assure you that we're not just going to take the information and just keep it all to ourselves, but even as we deal with our own kids, me particularly, you know, I have a niece and I'm often, you know, trying to get her to like figure out what's next for her because she herself doesn't know what's next. She's 21. And, you know, she's always asking me, what do you think I should do? I'm asking, what do you want to do? And she doesn't know. And, you know, recently I told her, I think you should reach out to some of your friends that you went to high school with and find out from them what they're doing, how are they doing, what did they do after school, and see if you get some inspiration from them. But that is from my limited knowledge of how to direct her. Because for me, in growing up, I also didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I just knew that you just put one foot in front of the other. And as you do one thing, you kind of figure out what the next is, what, you know, as you go along. And
Could
so
you
I
check
just,
1 second, Chanel, sorry to cut you. You had anything else on Facebook that I didn't address that I could just quickly answer to from Facebook, or is it you covered it?
I think I addressed most of the questions on Facebook, but the reality is we don't have a lot of time. We only have 2 more minutes left. So
Right.
we just can't
Right.
take everyone, but we took most of the questions from Facebook. But in closing, we can take this information into our personal situation. And for me, what I got away from this, moving away, is to be more compassionate, especially toward young persons.
And
'Cause we,
respectful of human development.
right,
We're
we
good
have
on other developmental issues, but we need to respect and get the human development information.
exactly, because we have been socialized to think that you should know this by now, or by now you should at least be thinking on a particular level, but understanding that based on, you know, cognitive functionality and the brain
Yeah.
development, that the young persons are there at a different time as well. So I am hoping that the parents that are listening this evening are a lot more understanding with the kids, you know, and one of the questions that stood out is a person asking, how can I approach a teacher and tell that teacher that I feel like they're pushing a little bit too hard? And I'm very pleased with the response that came from Camile Swapp in responding to a lot of these questions that came forward. Camille, I'm going to ask you to share your screen one more time
Sure.
with the
Sure.
last contact page, so that
Yes, yes.
who want to reach out to you, who felt like, okay, they didn't want to ask their question in this forum.
Yes. See the contact page here, Camile
Right.
at joyfullearner.com. And
Yeah.
so you can send me, you know, a text, or you can email or at joyfullearner.com.
You
And then I
have
can check the Facebook to see what those questions were. Yes, the children are born in late months, but if they're teens, you explain to them. If they know they're young, they'll just work a little harder. They'll say, okay, I'm not lazy, but I'm young, and they'll try and see what they can do. Some children might need an extra time, but you have to be careful with that in how you do it.
excellent. And so again, we want to thank everyone who stayed tuned to the discussion this evening. If you have an organization and you would like to have Camille come and speak on some of these topics, again, use the same contact information that she just posted on the screen. If you have a child who you think is at risk and you feel like maybe this is the answer, finally, maybe if I have Camille speak to my kid, maybe she might be a better person to get through to my child, you can reach out to Camille and find out if she has the time or the ability to do something like that. And we just want to thank you guys again for supporting everything that Tobago CivilNet has been doing. Before we leave, we want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, Eastern Credit Union, for supporting an initiative like this one. And remember, next week, Tuesday, Dr.
Ulrich Johnson
is going to be pulling it all together as he talks about it from a policy perspective and what can be implemented utilizing that public health approach to fighting crime and violence here in Tobago. So as we close out, we're gonna hear that video from Xavier Edwards again. Guys, have a great evening.
Okay, take care, everybody, and thanks for the time.